Have you ever had that strange feeling of looking around and realizing that somehow you've grown up faster than everyone else? I'm not talking about height or age, but that internal growth, that maturity that arrives like unexpected rain on a sunny day. It's an experience that's simultaneously liberating and devastatingly lonely. Albert Camus, the French philosopher who dedicated his life to understanding the absurdity of human existence, knew this price all too well. He grew up amid poverty in Algeria, lost his father very early, and had to mature quickly to survive. This experience shaped not only his personality, but his entire philosophy about what it means to be human in a world that frequently makes no sense. When Camus was still young, he already carried on his shoulders responsibilities that most people only know in adulthood. He grew up caring for his deaf and nearly mute mother, working from an early age to help support the family. While other boys his age played carelessly, he observed the world with eyes that had already seen too much. This forced acceleration of growth created in him a unique perspective on life, a premature understanding that human existence is fundamentally marked by solitude and the absurd. It's interesting to note how this personal experience translated into his philosophical work. Camus didn't write about the absurd as an abstract concept. He lived it daily in the skin of someone who had grown faster than the world around him would naturally allow. The price of growing faster than everyone around you begins with existential isolation. When you develop emotional and intellectual maturity that your peers haven't yet reached, you find yourself in strange and often misunderstood territory. Camus described this feeling as always being one step ahead or one step behind the world's rhythm, never exactly in the right beat. It's as if you spoke a language that others are still learning, or as if you saw colors that others can't yet distinguish. This difference in growth pace creates a particular form of solitude that Camus would call absurd. You're not alone because there are no people around you, but because the people who are around you can't fully follow or understand the existential place where you find yourself. It's loneliness in the midst of the crowd, an experience that Camus explored deeply in both his philosophy and his literature. The first manifestation of this price is the loss of innocence at an accelerated pace. While others still believe in simple answers and absolute truths, you've already begun to question everything. Camus experienced this when he realized, still very young, that there was no inherent meaning in life, that there was no divine plan or natural order of things that guaranteed justice or significance. This early revelation can be both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because you free yourself from the illusions that keep many people trapped in unrealistic expectations about how life should be. Terrifying because you lose that comforting feeling that someone or some superior force is taking care of everything, that there's an ultimate meaning waiting to be discovered. Camus described this loss as necessary but painful. It's like waking up from a beautiful dream to discover you were always awake, that the dream was just a way to avoid facing the naked reality of human existence. Another cruel aspect of this accelerated growth is premature responsibility. When you grow faster than others, you often end up taking on roles and responsibilities for which you may not yet be completely emotionally prepared. Camus experienced this intensely when he had to become a support figure for his family from a very early age. He didn't have the luxury of a prolonged adolescence or years of carefree exploration. Life forced him to make important decisions, to carry significant emotional weights, and to develop inner strength before he'd even had time to build a solid foundation for that strength. It's like building the upper floors of a building before having completely finished the foundations. It works, but there's always a sense of instability, an awareness that you're juggling responsibilities you perhaps shouldn't be carrying yet. The misunderstanding of others is another heavy price to pay. When you grow faster than your environment, your concerns, interests, and ways of seeing the world often seem strange or even pretentious to those who haven't yet gone through the same process. Camus faced this throughout his life. His school colleagues sometimes didn't understand his premature seriousness, his tendency to ask deep questions about issues they still considered simple or irrelevant. Later, as a writer and philosopher, he was frequently misinterpreted, seen as pessimistic or nihilistic, when he was actually trying to build a philosophy of hope based on accepting reality as it is, not as we'd like it to be. This misunderstanding creates a particular form of intellectual and emotional solitude. You feel as if you're speaking a foreign language, even when using the same words as everyone else, Stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt displaced in this way? Have you ever had the feeling that your concerns and insights about life were misunderstood by others? Leave your experience in the comments. I want to understand how this manifests in your lives, because I believe many of us go through this to different degrees and at different moments in life. Accelerated growth also brings with it a particular form of melancholy that Camus knew well. It's the melancholy of someone who has lost the ability to completely delude themselves, of someone who can no longer believe in simple promises or easy solutions. It's not that you become cynical. In fact, Camus always fought against cynicism. But you develop a kind of anticipatory nostalgia, a longing for an innocence you're not even sure you ever really possessed. It's as if you miss a place where you've never been, a way of seeing the world that you lost before you'd even had the chance to fully enjoy it. This melancholy isn't necessarily destructive, but it colors all your experiences with a different tonality, more complex and, in a way, more beautiful, though also heavier. The pressure of being the most mature, the most responsible, the one who always has answers, or at least the best questions, is another significant burden. When you grow faster than others, people often begin to place expectations on you that can be overwhelming. They expect you to always know what to do, to always have a wise perspective on situations, to be a source of emotional stability even when you yourself are still discovering who you are and how to navigate the world. Camus felt this pressure intensely, especially after becoming a recognized public figure. People expected him to have definitive answers about fundamental existential questions, when in fact, his greatest contribution was showing that perhaps questions are more important than answers, that perhaps wisdom lies in learning to live with the uncertainty and absurdity of human existence. But perhaps the highest price of growing faster than everyone around you is the difficulty of forming genuinely deep connections. When you're at a different stage of emotional and intellectual development, it can be challenging to find people with whom you can be completely authentic. You might feel you need to tone down your intensity or complexity to fit in, or you might constantly find yourself in the role of mentor or counselor, even when what you really want is to be understood and supported. Camus wrote extensively about human solitude, but his own experience of this solitude was particularly acute because he had developed a capacity to see and feel aspects of existence that many people around him hadn't yet explored. This didn't make him superior. In fact, he always emphasized the fundamental equality among all human beings, but it created a particular form of isolation that profoundly influenced his understanding of the human condition. The feeling of always being out of phase with the world is another aspect of this experience that Camus understood deeply. It's as if you were a time traveler who arrived a little too early or a little too late for each moment. When everyone is celebrating, you've already begun to see the shadows behind the joy. When everyone is lamenting, you've already begun to glimpse possibilities for renewal and growth. This temporal displacement isn't necessarily a curse, but it can be profoundly disorienting. You feel as if you can never completely synchronize with the collective rhythm, as if there's always a small distance between you and the present moment shared by everyone else. Camus described this feeling as a fundamental part of the absurd experience of life. We never manage to fit perfectly into the world. There's always something that doesn't align completely. The development of emotional hypersensitivity is another frequent price of this accelerated growth. When you mature rapidly, you often develop an intensified ability to perceive emotional nuances, unspoken tensions, and layers of meaning that others might not notice. This can be a precious gift, allowing you to have a deeper understanding of people and situations, but it can also be a heavy burden. You feel everything more intensely, perceive wounds and joys that others haven't even noticed, carry emotions that aren't always your own. Camus had this heightened sensitivity, which manifested both in his ability to write about human experience with such precision and in his own emotional vulnerability. He felt the world suffering in an almost physical way, which fed his compassion, but also his tendency toward melancholy and deep existential questioning. The paradoxical combination of wisdom and naivety is another complex aspect of this experience. When you grow rapidly in some areas, you might remain surprisingly naive in others. You might have a sophisticated understanding of human nature, but still be surprised by betrayals. You might have deep insights about the human existential condition, but still expect the world to be more just than it really is. Camus experienced this contradiction throughout his life. He had a lucid and sometimes brutal understanding of the absurdity of existence, but maintained an almost childlike hope in human beings' capacity to create meaning and beauty despite this absurdity. This combination of lucidity and hope, of maturity and naivety, created in him a constant tension that fed both his suffering and his creativity. The weight of premature consciousness about mortality is another crucial aspect of this experience. When you grow faster than others, you often also develop a more acute awareness of life's finitude. While others still live with the unconscious feeling that they have all the time in the world, you've already begun to feel the weight of human existence's brevity. Camus had this awareness from very early on, especially after being diagnosed with tuberculosis while still young. This proximity to mortality didn't make him morbid, but gave him a particular urgency about life. He knew time was limited, that each moment had special weight precisely because it wouldn't last forever. This awareness can be liberating, making you value each experience more intensely, but it can also be oppressive, creating constant pressure to make every moment count. The need to build a value system alone is another significant challenge. When you grow faster than your environment, you often outgrow the belief and value systems you were given in childhood, before finding a community that shares your new insights. This means you need to build your own moral and existential compass, often without much external support or guidance. Camus went through this process intensely, especially when he distanced himself from his childhood's religious beliefs without immediately finding a philosophical system that completely answered his questions. He had to develop his own philosophy of the absurd, his own ethics based on revolt, creation, and human solidarity. This process of individual value construction can be deeply enriching, but it can also be frightening and lonely. The experience of being misinterpreted as pretentious or arrogant is another common price of this journey. When you demonstrate insights or concerns that go beyond what's typical for your age or context, some people might interpret this as pretension or superiority. Camus faced this perception throughout his career. His deep philosophical questions were sometimes seen as intellectual posturing. His seriousness was interpreted as lack of humor. His depth was confused with pretension. This can create constant pressure to prove that you're genuine, to demonstrate that your maturity is real and not just a facade. It can also lead you to constantly question your own motives and police yourself in ways that can be harmful to your natural growth. If you've made it this far, it's because this topic resonates deeply with you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take advantage and do it now. Every week I bring deep reflections on human existence, exploring the ideas of great thinkers who dedicated their lives to understanding what it means to be human in this complex and often incomprehensible world. But Camus taught us that all these prices, however heavy they may be, don't need to be seen only as burdens. They can also be transformed into sources of strength, creativity, and deep compassion. Isolation can become independence, melancholy can become depth, hypersensitivity can become empathy, awareness of mortality can become urgency to live fully. Camus developed the concept of the rebellious man, not as someone who destructively rebels against life, but as someone who, having recognized the absurdity of existence, consciously chooses to create meaning, beauty, and human connection despite this absence of inherent meaning. He knew that growing faster than others around you can be an isolating and painful experience, but he also recognized that it can be a source of unique understanding about the human condition. This understanding, when well directed, can become a gift not only to you but to all the people who are fortunate enough to cross your path. The secret, according to Camus, lies in learning to carry this premature maturity without letting it make you bitter or superior, but allowing it to make you more compassionate and more capable of helping others who are going through the same process of accelerated growth.